Right. So it is now 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Want to be respectful of everyone's time here. Thank you all for joining. We have a great turnout this evening. Please, again, put your full name and the college you will be attending into the chat so we can track who attended. And if you are a parent or guardian, if you could please put your student's name and their college into the chat. Just so you know, this is being recorded. So if you do not want your face to potentially be shown on our website, please turn off your video now and please keep yourselves muted. We uh, will be recording this and it will be available for future reference. So my name is Whitney Lytle, and I am the Director of Scholar Advocacy at the Worthington Scholarship Foundation. We are also very lucky to have Mila Tappan from the Finance Authority of Maine with us this evening. Mila will be starting off the presentation in just a minute by discussing how to understand your financial aid package, and I will follow up with how your Worthington Scholarship works within your financial aid package. And finally, I'll share some financial aid advice and tips that we've gathered from past and current Worthington interns and scholars. And after the presentation, we will have time to ask questions for either myself or to Mila. And that can be about your scholarship. If it's very particular to your situation, I may have you follow up with me after in an email or with your scholar advocate. And if you have questions throughout the presentation, you can go ahead and put them in the chat and we will try and answer all of them at the end. Okay. So, some of you may already be aware of this fantastic organization, but for those of you who are not, the Finance Authority of Maine has the primary goal of helping Mainers pay for and understand the process of paying for higher education. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you go to their website where they even have a scholarship search function. And as I mentioned, Mila is the College Access and Outreach Manager at FAME, and she is here to start us off. And Mila, I will stop sharing and turn things over to you now.
All righty. Well, I'm so excited to be here with you all tonight. I saw all of your names. I saw all of the places that you will be attending, and I'm so excited for you all. It's just an amazing time in your life, and you have so much to look forward to. So I'm so happy to be here tonight and try to help you navigate this process. So, as Whitney said, we're going to talk about financial aid. I know it's such an exciting topic, but it is important. I'm going to talk about how schools determine need, regardless of which school you're attending, a little bit about the types of aid, and then we're going to talk about what happens if adjustments are needed. Some of you might have received, scholarship money in addition to Worthington, and it may be impacting your financial aid eligibility, and we want you to know, if it does, what you can do, and then some tips to just maximize your financial aid eligibility. As said, please put any questions into the chat or hold tight, and we will answer them at the end. But we want to be sure that you leave here tonight feeling comfortable with financial aid, with this process. And we know it's the first time you've been through this, so we expect that you would have a lot of questions. So let me start by talking about how schools determine how much need you have for financial aid, and then we'll talk a little bit about how they have filled it. So every school out there determines financial aid eligibility the same. What they all do is they start by building what they call a cost of attendance. I know there's a lot of acronyms in financial aid, so whether I do it or anybody else does, as you start working with financial aid offices, say, hey, I don't understand what that term means, okay? But COA, or cost of attendance, is basically what it's costing you to attend that particular school. And that's going to include the obvious things that you might think about, your tuition and fees and housing and food, but it also includes your indirect expenses, things like your books, your supplies, transportation back and forth from home, and even other miscellaneous expenses. So, not surprisingly, the cost of attendance varies dramatically. I would say we've got people who are attending schools where the total cost of attendance, is 13, 14,000, upwards of 80,000. So cost of attendance is going to vary by school. And then what schools do once they have their cost of attendance is they subtract out your specific student aid index. So when you filed your FAFSA, you found that the end result of filing FAFSA was everything went through this formula, and the end result was your student aid index or SAI. And that SAI was even required when you applied for the Worthington Scholarship. That was a piece of information that was taken into account. And so your SAI theoretically was the same at every single school. So every school said, here's our cost of attendance minus your SAI, in theory, what they think your family can contribute. And what you had left was your amount of financial need. And because the cost of attendance varies, the amount of need that you have at individual schools varies. So if you think back to the time, what was it, maybe in March, April, May, you might have had multiple financial aid offers, and the types of aid that you were offered at each school and the amounts of aid that you were offered at each school might have been very different. And this is a lot of the reason why there's such a difference, is because the cost, that starting cost, varies. Additionally, I'm going to be honest, some schools have more money than others. And so that's another thing that factors in. So here's just an example of what it might look like at a particular school. So let's say our public four-year institutions. The cost of attendance tends to be around 28, maybe a little bit higher at Orono, but around $28,000 per year. So one of the important things I want you to know for tonight is that financial aid is calculated on an annual basis. So it's not like the admissions process where if you apply, you're admitted, you love the school, you don't have to reapply for admission every year, but you do have to reapply for financial aid every year. So we have a cost of attendance of about 28,000. Let's say your student aid index was about 12,000. That means you had about 16,000 in financial need. So in a perfect world, every school would have given you enough to fill all of your original needs. So in this case scenario, $16,000. Again, some schools have more money than others. Some schools are able to fill all of your need, and other schools aren't always able to. So that's some differences that you might see as well. Now, how schools go about funding your financial aid or providing resources to you is that they are going to try to award you money from all sorts of different buckets of funds. So the best types of funds are grants and scholarships. So grants are what we call free money, and we call it free just because you don't have to repay any grant money. Grant money is usually going to be based on your financial situation. It's usually going to be based on, you filled out the FAFSA and your SAI. That's what's going to determine eligibility for grants. You might have a federal Pell Grant. You might have a Maine State Grant, for example. And this goes towards filling that need, that 16,000 that you saw a moment ago. This goes towards filling that. And then there are scholarships, and scholarships are amazing as well. They too are free money in the sense that they don't have to be repaid. But usually when you get a scholarship, there's a little bit more to it. Some scholarships do require that you have need, but usually there's an academic component of it to some extent, okay, or some other criteria. But the best thing is these are funds that don't have to be repaid. Then there's work study. So some of you might have been offered work study. You might have been offered work study at some schools and not at other schools. And work study is basically an amount of money that you can earn once you get to campus. So it's not helping pay that first bill, but it's an amount of money that you can earn by working in a job, usually on campus, and you basically get a paycheck every other week. And how much you earn depends on the job you're doing and how many hours a week you are working. Now, if you have work study, one of the things I want you to know is there's typically an office on campus that can help you find your work study job and help you navigate that process. So be on the lookout if you have work study for information on work study and what your next steps need to be. And then last but not least, there are student loans, and I'm focusing specifically on federal student loans. These are funds, loans do have to be repaid. When it comes to federal student loans, there's what's called subsidized and unsubsidized. They are the same in every way, except that with subsidized loans, your interest is going to be covered while you're in school by the federal government. So your subsidized loans are not going to grow while you're in school. They're going to be the same amount that you originally borrow. Unsubsidized loans are not based on your financial need. And the difference is that interest will be accruing while you're in school. So many of you probably saw in your financial aid offers that you were offered $3,500 in a subsidized loan and maybe $2,000 in an unsubsidized loan. The maximum you can get as a first year student would be $5,500. The exact ratio of sub to unsub does depend on your specific situation. So the school will figure out what that ratio was, and they're always going to give you the maximum amount of subsidized eligibility that you are eligible for. Okay, so you filed your FAFSA, schools developed their cost of attendance, they figured out how much need you had, they filled your financial need with some of these types of aid. Hopefully you have a lot of these various types of aid. But then what happens sometimes, which is a wonderful thing, is that at graduation or class night or somewhere in the spring semester, you learn that you are going to be receiving some additional scholarships. And we talk about these as outside scholarships, which means that they're simply scholarships that are awarded by and funded by some organization outside of your specific school that you are attending. Okay. Financial aid offices, and I used to be a financial aid officer. I saw many of you are attending Orono. It's where I graduated from. It's where I worked in the financial aid office for years. And so financial aid offices do have rules when it comes to students receiving outside money. And so I wanted to talk about this, and I always appreciate that Whitney invites me to talk about this because even though it's a little bit boring and dry, and I get that, it's really important because the reason is we want you to be sure you maximize your financial aid. We want to be sure that you get as much of the financial aid as you're eligible to receive as possible. And so we want you to kind of know where schools are required to make cuts or to make changes so that you can be informed and reach out to them and ask them the right questions so that you can get as much money as possible. All right, so hypothetically, we have this scenario where this school is 28,000, your student aid index was 12, you've got $16,000 in financial need. And so this school went ahead and they gave you a merit scholarship, they gave you a university grant, you got some work study, you got your subsidized loan. But in this case, you got some unsubsidized as well. So you're receiving all of these various types of financial aid. Now, keep in mind, not that there's going to be a test on this, I promise there's not. But when we talk about unsubsidized loans, those don't actually fill need all the time. They can, but they don't have to. And it's a really kind of bizarre concept, but we can go more into that individually if you want to. But the first four categories, merit scholarships, university grants, work study, subsidized loans, those are all filling your needs. So in this case, the school did a pretty good job. They met a lot of the students' financial need, 12,500, not 16,000, but we're in a pretty good place. But then you were awarded a $5,000 scholarship. Now, I'm not talking about Worthington for the moment because we're going to talk about Worthington in a little bit. And Whitney's going to go into even more detail because you have more options with your Worthington scholarship than you might with your others. But sometimes students who receive one type of scholarship have multiple scholarships. So if you're in a situation where you had this financial aid offer, what you would see here is that you had 12,500 in aid, you had 16,000 in your original cost. That meant there was 3,500 that you didn't get. The school wasn't able to give you everything that you needed. So one of the reasons we wanted you to apply for a scholarship is so that you could find other funds to close what we call that gap. And so you did. So you got this outside scholarship for $5,000. The school has to take that into consideration. You are obligated to let schools know if you received any scholarships from any outside sources. But the challenge is that your scholarship exceeded the amount of need you had left by $1,500. When that happens, the financial aid office is required to do something. They can't leave you in a situation where you have more need-based financial aid than you have need, okay? So there are two things a financial aid office can do. They can either adjust the aid, the other financial aid that you have, or they can increase your cost of attendance. So just briefly, I'm going to go over those two scenarios and you can see if these are scenarios that might be applicable to you and then know what to do next. So over here on the side is just a reminder of what that offer was. But option one is they can simply adjust aid. As mentioned, you in this scenario with that outside scholarship have 1,500 more in financial aid than you have need. So what the school can do is they could reduce your university grant. That's not what we want them to do, but that is their right. Or they could reduce your work study. And maybe that's fine because maybe you don't need your work study. Maybe you've got a part-time job already and you don't need work study. So reducing that's no big deal. Or they could adjust your loan and move some of your need-based loan to unsubsidized. So those are things that you might see happen, or you might have already seen happen, depending on the school that you're at and if the scenario exists for you. Another thing, and this is what I really wanted to focus on tonight, another thing is schools can increase your cost of attendance. And so this is important this year, but I want you to keep this in mind all the way forward. Okay, so you're, going maybe to school for, 1 year, 2 year, 4 years, 6 years. I want you to keep in mind this is applicable all the way through your educational experience. So let's go back to our original example. Your cost of attendance was 28,000. Your student aid index was 12. Your need was 16,000. You had $3,500 in unmet need. If you've got that $5,000 scholarship, one of the things that they can do is if you reach out to them, and this is one of the key pieces, if you reach out to your school and say, hey, I know I got a lot of scholarships, but I purchased a computer, or I'm planning to purchase a computer this summer. Can you take that into consideration? If you think back to what I talked about in terms of how a school builds their budget or their cost of attendance for you, they don't automatically build in the purchase of a computer in most cases. There's some exceptions, but generally speaking, they don't. Well, if they are willing to recognize that you bought a computer and you have receipts, keep your receipts, and let's just say in this scenario it was $2,000, they can recognize that cost. You've already paid for it, but they can recognize that. And what that does is that gives you more room to get more scholarships and not have to have any of your aid adjusted. So that's the big thing I want you to know, that there is the possibility for you to work with the school. So even if you have a tremendous number of scholarships, that there is a way that you can keep more of those scholarships and not lose out on any of your financial aid. I know so many of you worked so hard to get scholarships. We want you to see the benefit of that. The other thing that schools can do to recognize possible increases is anytime you have costs that are higher than what they're budgeting, they theoretically can increase to reflect that. Them increasing your cost of attendance doesn't cost you anything, right? They're increasing your cost of attendance is just them acknowledging costs that you already have. So again, as you make your way through this process, if you're spending a lot on books and supplies, more than what is considered average at your school, you can let them know that. If you are taking, let's say, when I was working at Orono, we typically budgeted based on 15 credits a semester. If I had a student who had a lot of outside money and they were taking, like 18 credits a semester, I could recognize that and make more room for them to get more financial aid. They were living in a single rather than a double. We could look at that. If they had transportation costs, they can't recognize car payments. That's a no-go. But they can look at things like your gas and your insurance or repairs. So anytime you have something going on where what it's costing you is more than what they standardly are assuming, you can work with them and you can have them reflect these expenses that you have already paid for or are needing to pay for. So there are also things like childcare and costs related to a disability. So if those are applicable, those are other things that we would want you to share. So down here at the bottom, you can see if you increase the amount of need, so because you increase the cost, then the student would have the room for the full $5,000 scholarship. And that's what we want. We want you to get all of that scholarship. Now, just one more scenario that I want to share with you before I just do a few tips and then I'll pass it off to Whitney, is that I want you to keep in mind that your total aid can exceed your total cost. So we've been kind of talking about your need, your financial aid can exceed your need. Well, the other piece is it also can't exceed your total cost. And where this is really applicable, and I saw that there are so many of you taking advantage of community college, which I think is great, you want to keep in mind that those costs are lower. That's a good thing. So let's say in this case, throw out the other case, brand new case, where you're attending a community college and their cost of attendance is about 14,000. And that's because their tuition and fees, for example, are so much less than even at our public four-year schools. In this case, you've got a student aid index when you filed the FAFSA of 0. So I'm betting there are some of you out there who had a 0 or even a negative student aid index. So that means in that case, you would be eligible to get a full Pell Grant, a full Main State grant. I have included your Worthington right here, a $3,000 Worthington scholarship potentially, and additionally $3,000 from outside, from some other organization. When we do the math, and there's a lot of math in financial aid, we look at your total aid and it exceeds your total cost. And when that happens, schools need to do something. Something needs to happen. So one of the things they can do is what we just talked about, which is you can tell them that you bought a computer, or you can let them know that you had these other expenses, and they potentially can increase your cost and make room for any of the money that you received. But in other cases, if an adjustment is necessary, then thankfully, and this is so exciting because this is not the way it works with every scholarship organization, the Worthington Scholarship Funds could potentially be rolled forward. So I'm not going to go any further than that right now because Whitney's going to talk more about that. But these examples tonight were just to kind of provide a little bit of information. Again, no test, but just that if your aid is ever adjusted or if things are happening with your financial aid, know that you do have the ability and the right, and I would say responsibility, to work with your financial aid office to make sure they understand your circumstances. So just a couple of little tidbits before I finish off for tonight, except for your questions, is that you do have to let schools know about scholarships, but you want to do that as early as possible. I hope that you've already done that if you have scholarships, but if you haven't, you do need to, because what happens sometimes is, not talking about Worthington, but other types of scholarships, sometimes those scholarships, you become eligible for them once you've completed your first semester. And then once you do that, they're going to send a check to the business office. When they send a check to the business office, the financial aid office is going to find out that you have these scholarships. So the earlier you let them know, the likelihood that you can have, if adjustments are needed, they're going to work to your advantage, or maybe you can avoid having adjustments made altogether. Now, if your financial situation has changed, or your parents' financial situation specifically, you can also always ask for an income appeal. So keep in mind that your financial aid was based on your FAFSA. And if you remember, when you filed your FAFSA, it was using 2024 income for the upcoming year. So if the family's financial situation is better, don't worry about it. But if the family's financial situation has gotten worse, if there's been a decrease in income, for example, you can let the school know that and they can take that into consideration. Okay. So what you want to do is be sure that if aid does have to be adjusted, though, you work with your school to create a scenario that's best for you, because what works best for you might not be the same for another student. So you need to let them know what's going on with you. And then just a few more general tips. You do need to file for financial aid every single year. And the FAFSA for the upcoming year, which means the FAFSA for your next year, is actually going to be available on October 1st, no later than October 1st. So even though you're just starting school, it's going to be shortly after you start time to file your FAFSA for the next year. So it happens really early. So just make sure that's on your radar. Two more things. If you are borrowing federal student loans, you do have to do something called complete an entrance interview, which is just an online tutorial where they make sure you understand your rights and responsibilities. You have to do that. It's done at studentaid.gov. And you also have to sign what they call a master promissory note. So the way that it works for federal loans is you sign this promissory note electronically one time, the first time you borrow, and then that promissory note will cover any of your future borrowing if you have federal student loans that you're going to get one year after the next. So these are two steps that you do the first time you borrow, but you don't have to do these every single year. But you can't get your money until you do these things. So you want to be sure you get those done so that you don't get a late fee or something like that. And if there's any other financial aid that is not showing up on your bill that is coming, make sure the school knows that, because again, we don't want you getting a late fee. And then last but not least, the federal government has made some changes to loans recently, and it's as a result of the One Big Beautiful Bill, or HR 1 or OB3, whatever we are calling it these days, where if you adjust your course load, it is possible that your financial aid could be adjusted, even if you've got plenty of room, plenty of need, you're well below the cost of attendance. So this is a new thing, that if you have federal student loans, and let's just say you were taking 12 credits per semester. And sometimes students are taking a course and they're just like, you know what, it's not working out for me. And sometimes students will drop a course. And I'm not recommending that you do, but it definitely happens. So we wanted to talk a little bit about it. If you drop below that 12 credits in this scenario, your loan is going to be adjusted, regardless of whether or not you continue to pay for those 12 credits. So that's a new thing. It's always been a little bit the case, although it's slightly different with Pell Grants and Maine State Grants. But before you ever adjust your credit load, be sure you talk with someone in the financial aid office, whether it's dropping, one class or two classes or anything. Talk with them, because what I don't want to have happen is you to, talk on the academic side of the house and have them knowing that you need to drop a class, but then realizing it has financial ramifications. And sometimes students don't realize that. So I just want to be sure that if that ever does happen, that you talk to your financial aid office person, make a friend with them, get to know someone in the financial aid office, because their job is to help you navigate this process. So with that, I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to turn it over to Whitney, and hold tight I think you wanted to go first before we even address any questions. Correct, Whitney?
Yes, that is correct. We'll just
Now,
get
Whitney,
straight.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Is anyone else having trouble hearing Whitney? Okay, must just be on my end. It might just be on my speaker. So sorry, Whitney, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, I'll try and maybe I'll speak up just in case you're not the only one. Okay. All right. So, first of all, thank you, Mila. Again, she will be sticking around to answer questions, so go ahead and put them in the chat. Um, I'm going to review some of the Worthington Scholarship kind of highlights. I'm going to stick with some of the similar numbers that Mila used, just so we can kind of stay on the same page. And we're going to see what happens to a Worthington scholar in some of those scenarios that Mila pointed out. You will see some kind of repeated advice here, and that is because it is very, very important. So again, everything that Mila was mentioning, I'll be mentioning some similar things as well, and just sort of how they roll into Worthington. So, okay. As a reminder, our scholarship pays your college approximately 2 weeks to 3 weeks after your add drop date. And add drop means that it is the last day to add or drop a class without penalty. And after this date, the college will provide us with a list of our scholars and the number of credit hours that you are enrolled in. So we check that you are enrolled full time and then send our scholarship payment for you to the college. Okay, so as long as you're enrolled in the minimum required 12 credit hours or the equivalent for Bates, Bowdoin, and College of the Atlantic, so full time, and you have told us what college you are attending, your payment will arrive. So for our UMaine Orono scholars, just because we have so many scholars that are attending there, keep in mind it might take some extra time for the financial aid office to process the payments into your accounts, just because we have, I think, over 800 Worthington scholars there this year. So it's a lot of people to process. They sometimes take a little extra time. So no late fee should be charged, as all of our college partners know when to expect our payments, which do come in later than others. So they do know this, and there should be no late fee applied based on our schedule. So if you do see a late fee applied, contact your scholar advocate and they can reach out to our financial aid contacts on your behalf and we can get that late fee removed. At the end of this presentation, there will be a slide with a list of each of the Scholar Advocates colleges and their contact information in case you don't have that. And you will likely see the scholarship on your financial aid page of your college account. It might say pending. And if you do not see it on your financial aid page and you have told us the correct college that you'll be attending, don't worry, it's okay. Sometimes you have to put it in yourself, and there are ways to do that. We have already sent in the list of all of our new scholars to our colleges, so they should know you're coming, even if it's not something that they do themselves of putting it into your account that you can see it. But you can talk to your financial aid office if you're concerned. Okay, so I want to highlight that the Worthington Scholarship can be used towards the total cost of attendance. And as Mila explained, the cost of attendance is made up of direct and indirect costs. So direct costs are those which are paid directly to the college, and indirect are those which you pay for yourself. So like the books and supplies, off-campus housing, if that applies to you, technology, transportation. We are often asked how someone can use our scholarship to pay those indirect costs. And what happens is your college looks at your entire financial aid package, so Worthington Scholarship included, and they first pay themselves for direct costs of tuition and fees and housing and meals, if you're living on campus. And then if you have scholarships, grants, or loan funds that exceeds those direct costs, you will receive a check or a direct deposit from the school for what's left over. So that's called a refund check, and you are expected to use that money towards your indirect costs. Okay, so now I want to go over a few scenarios where you might find that you're only receiving partial amount of your Worthington scholarship. It does happen. So I'll start out by saying that a partial payment does not mean that you have lost any of your funds from us, okay? And as Mila expressed, some of you might have financial aid which exceeds your calculated financial need. So under other circumstances, like Mila explained, the college would need to reduce some of your aid that they are giving you in order to fit in all of your outside scholarships. However, one of the benefits of being a Worthington Scholar is the agreement that we have with each of our partner colleges. Our scholarship is applied to your account after all of your other aid has been applied. So by doing this, we are making sure that none of your financial aid from whom your college is reduced due to our scholarship. So you can maximize your financial aid award. So we will hold back some of your aid from us in order to make sure you can fit as much of everything else in there first, just in case, because we don't want you to lose that. So let's look again at this hypothetical student attending a four-year college with a cost of attendance of 28,000 and a student aid index of 12,000. So keep in mind the college calculates these numbers based on the entire year, so not semester by semester. And the student has a calculated financial need of 16,000 and a combined $12,500 in grants from their college and other outside scholarships and $5,000 from the Worthington. So after all the other aid is applied to this student's bill, so that's all the funding from the college, all those outside scholarships, there is only $3,500 left in their financial need for the year, where the Worthington Scholarship is a total of $5,000 for the year paid out in $2,500 per semester. So since the student can only use $3,500 of the Worthington Scholarship, that leaves $1,500 that the student was unable to use this year. So depending on when other scholarships pay out. For example, we pay each semester, but some might only pay in the fall or only in the spring. They might be able to keep, um, they might be able to take a full payment from us in the fall, but not in the spring, or vice versa, or partial in both. But by the end of the year, they will not have been able to use $1,500 of their Worthington scholarship. And again, as we are last to pay, rather than reducing any of the other financial aid, we'll hold on to this amount as a rollover. And we will apply that to the next semester that the student needs more funding. So this scenario is most likely to occur in your first year of college because that's when most students have the most scholarships. So let's look at the student's year two. Okay, so let's say in their second year, they have the same cost of attendance and student aid index, but now they only have 8,500 in scholarships and grants. So they'll now have a 7,500 remaining in financial need. So this year, they'll receive their normal Worthington scholarship payments of 2,500 a semester, but also the additional $1,500 from the previous year. So you can also use your rollover funds now to pay for summer courses. So if there's one class that you want to take, but you're like, I don't have the tuition to take that one class in the summer. If you have rollover from us, you just have to let us know. You contact your scholar advocate, and we will set it up so your rollover funds go to the college to help you pay for that summer class. Okay. So there is another scenario that may result in a partial payment of your scholarship, and yet you still receive a bill from your college. And this is most likely to occur for those of you that have been awarded the Pell or State of Maine grant, which the majority of our scholars do. Colleges are required, as in this is a federal requirement, so not something that the most colleges can choose, particularly state schools. They are required to include your SAI as part of your financial aid calculation if you were awarded either of these grants, which means that you will need to pay the amount of your SAI either out of pocket or, as Mila said, with an unsubsidized loan. So, and you are given the option to choose. So you don't have to take a loan if you don't want to. And that can result in you receiving a bill, and yet you're not able to use the Worthington scholarship to its entirety. So in the example you see here, the student will need to pay the amount of 3,500, but is only able to use 3,000 of their Worthington scholarship because they met their total cost of attendance with financial aid. So this would result in a $2,000 rollover amount that again can be applied in future semesters or used to take summer classes. And I just want you to know that we completely understand that financial aid is very convoluted. It's rarely a clear-cut scenario. And especially as scholarships pay at different times, it's very hard to keep track of them. But I do want to assure you that our rollover system is meant to help you maximize the amount of aid that you're receiving over multiple years. And like Mila said, don't be afraid to talk to your financial aid office. We actually have individuals in each of our partner schools' financial aid offices that we work with entirely. So they completely understand the Worthington scholarship and how it works. And you can reach out to your scholar advocate to get that particular individual's name from them and contact info from your scholar advocate. So you know you're talking to the person who knows it the most. And your scholar advocate can even help create a Zoom meeting between all of you that will join you in your discussion with the financial aid office. And so they can help you ask questions. They can help you understand what anything meant if they said something that you didn't understand. So all you have to do is reach out to your scholar advocate. We are happy to help you with that. Okay, now we have some of the next advice is going to be because we have scholars and interns that were in these situations and have shared some advice. And one of them inspired this slide that if you still have a balance. So if you have a balance remaining after scholarships, grants, and federal student loans that you've been offered, and you are still unable to pay the balance out of pocket, your first step should be to contact your college's financial aid office, They might be able to help you identify additional aid or set up a payment plan. Again, raise that cost of attendance, make the balance more manageable. But if you still need to borrow money, I encourage you to look at a private student loan. Again, this is worst case scenario here from a local credit union before reaching for a credit card. Um, while interest rates definitely vary, and based on credit history, if applicable, a cosigner's credit, credit unions will offer a lower rate and more flexible terms than a credit card. Right now, the average credit card interest rates are around 24 to 30%, which is often much higher than the interest rates that you could qualify for through a credit union. And they also provide more like personal service than like larger national banks, which is why I'm tending to mention those. So credit cards should generally be your absolute last resort for paying for college expenses. And just choosing the right option now can save you a significant amount of money over time. So hopefully this will not be the case for any of you, that you will have to do any of these things, and we'll all be able to help you work it out with everything that's available to you through your own financial aid office and things like that. So, okay, so I've gathered some other tips from our scholars and things that they have learned and that they want to pass along with you. So, outside scholarships, and again, this is going to be a repeat, but it's very important. Make sure you are writing down all of the scholarships that you have received, how much they are paying, and report them to the college. So if you do not report them to the college and the college gets an unexpected check from one of your scholarship providers, they have to recalculate that financial aid package, and it may result a change in the amount of the refund check that you were sent. So this happened to one of our scholars a couple years ago. She had this happen when she'd forgotten about several of her scholarships and that she was awarded. They didn't pay out till spring, and she ended up owing money back to the college, which was very difficult for her because she had already spent it on different supplies and things. So that was a big surprise to her. So make sure you tell them about all of your scholarships right now. Another tip is if you've been awarded more scholarships than that you can use because of your aid and other scholarships already covering your cost of attendance, you can try and reach out to that scholarships committee and see if they can defer that scholarship for another semester when you actually need it. So again, we do this automatically with our rollover policy. You don't have to ask us. We work with your financial aid office. We already do this. But there are others, particularly if they're like local scholarships or things like that, they might be willing to just hold that check for you a little bit longer. All right, and another intern and scholar of ours highlighted how important it is to plan ahead for future years. So your finances in your first year in college might be more favorable than in the following years. So again, that's because there's a lot of outside scholarships that are possibly not renewable. You might only get them your first year, which means you've got to be creating a plan for when you don't have those scholarships in the following years. So we encourage you to do a scholarship search every year to see what's available for current college students. You can often find local scholarships that are not just for first year. You can contact your high school if you have a great counselor there. You can go to the FAME website and they offer a scholarship search tool. And this can help to support you beyond your first year and will be extremely valuable when you use up those non-renewable scholarships. So also note that some of these applications might require you to provide recommendation letters that are written within the last 12 months. So that also emphasizes the importance of making connections with your college faculty and the staff so that you have a network of people that know you and are willing to help you through that application process. Okay, so wrapping up here, I've added some helpful QR codes. The first will bring you to our website where you can find the login to your Scholar Portal. The second is to follow us on Instagram. We post a lot about upcoming events at your colleges, news, occasionally contests where you can win gift cards or prizes, and lastly, a QR code to Fame's scholarship search. All right. Now, my colleague Emily will be reading off questions that accumulated in the chat, but feel free to stick around and hear questions from others if you don't have any, or to continue to add your own questions now. But before you leave, make sure you have added your name or your student's name, if you're a parent or guardian, to the chat. And make sure to make a note for yourself as to who your scholar advocate is based on the college you'll be attending. And as a final reminder, please check in your Scholar portal that we have the correct college listed for you. Because if we do not, then we will not know where to send your money and we will think that you did not go. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If you have other questions, feel free to email me or email your Scholar advocate, okay? Thank you all for coming. I hope this was helpful.